right, great. Welcome, everyone. Great. So thank you. This is an excellent opportunity for all of us to talk about something very important, South-South collaboration. I'd like to thank UNFCCC for this opportunity as well. The panel is fostering South-South collaboration, scaling climate tech solutions through shared innovation. So we have a wonderful panel here as well. A very quick introduction, but I'll let them introduce themselves after the presentation. We have Milena Martins from Climate Ventures, Director of International Relations. Pradeepa Bolnat from Government of Guyana, Director of Climate Change at Red Plus. And Sombul Munshi from Climate Champions team. Great. So very quickly, we know that South-South cooperation is important. In innovation, there's innovation happening across the global South. Some of it is not easily transferable, replicable, lessons that are learned, financing that goes with it. These are challenges that we all face in the global South. So hopefully today we can look at some of the reasons why these obstacles exist and maybe brainstorm some other ideas where we can kind of move this forward. We do believe that without the global South being involved in the innovation space, it'll be very hard to scale solutions to where these solutions are needed. A little bit about us, Climate Collective. We're a nonprofit based in India. We're the largest clean tech startup support organization in India. Some quick numbers, our ninth year, 1,270 clean tech startups accelerated in 90 plus accelerators. We support, of course, startups in acceleration. Importantly, now that the innovation space is much bigger, we are helping startups pilot solutions. Before you scale solutions, you have to pilot effectively. And in fact, that is the key challenge in the global South is how do you get those quality pilots, whether it's with utilities, with private sector, with governments, local urban bodies, et cetera. Of course, when you think about the support needed for innovation, it goes beyond this, whether making sure that more opportunities are there for women and other groups that are often excluded in the innovation space, et cetera. We partner very well with lots of organizations. We actually have a special partnership with Climate Ventures sitting next to me here called the South-South Collective for the climate as well. South-South Collective for the climate. There we go. Okay. This thing is not moving too fast. Someone could help me with this. Great. We know that there's a lot of growth happening in the global South. If you're talking about the power sector, if you're talking about built environment, you will see much of this happening today in the global South. Decisions we make today on a low carbon path will be locked in for decades. This is where we really need to make sure that the development pathways are climate friendly or sustainable before we lock them in. There's a lot of vulnerability. I know, especially in India, we're very vulnerable to disasters that are increasingly hitting us, whether unusual monsoon patterns, a weakening monsoon actually over the last 50 years, of course, cyclones, et cetera, that are increasing in India and other countries in the global South as well. And in fact, I believe Guyana, Georgetown is particularly vulnerable to things like sea level rise as well. Great. So startups are starting to come up. Startups, when I'm talking about climate tech startups. When I started 9 years ago, I think there were 50 clean tech startups in India, right? 50 tech, high tech or deep tech. Today, there's something on the order of 8,000 clean tech startups. $2.5 billion went into clean tech startups in India a couple of years ago. This is a growth area where we can solve things like impact and jobs and economic development all at the same time. And although it is uneven across the global South, we think that the drivers are there for Brazil. Brazil actually is quite a mature market also in startups. New markets like in Guyana, where the development path is just starting afresh. I should say the new development path, where there's going to be lots of exciting things that we're going to see from Guyana as well. Great. Sorry. Having a little problem. Right. I think this is a Wi-Fi clicker. We do know there is a funding imbalance, and this is generally true in climate, of course. It's also true in the innovation and tech space. So something on the order of magnitude of 95 or 96% of funding goes to the global north and one or two countries like India. Brazil is also growing this space, but almost everywhere else, there is very little funding that comes for clean tech. We also know that these are new systems, new ecosystems that we're building for innovation, incubation. How do you build investment networks? How do you help develop deployment platforms for solutions, et cetera? This is where the Global South can come together more and learn from each other since our shared experience is very similar. And it's a very fragmented ecosystem. This is the difference between, I think, innovation and often some of the policy making. Innovation in India, we're talking about tens of thousands or a few thousands of actors involved. It is complicated, it's messy. We often don't even know what's happening down the street. And when you start thinking about the Global South, it becomes even more complicated. So we're looking through the South-South Collaborative to increase this orchestration across all these various stakeholders. We were talking about, of course, the innovators, incubators, but investors, government agencies, et cetera. Increasing this collaboration across the Global South is something that we believe, I think all of us in the room believe is important and needs to be done today as well. And of course, we need to mobilize a lot more capital to innovation space in the Global South as well. So thank you. I won't go through this slide. I thought we would have time. We have a great panel discussion coming up. I'd like to just first start by inviting the panelists to introduce themselves for a couple of minutes. We'll start with Milena Martins from Climate Ventures.
Thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here for such a strong conversation about the importance of South-South. I am Milena Martins. I work for Climate Ventures, and I come from a background of almost 26 years of organizational and people development in corporations, as well as curating ecosystems, partnerships, helping bridge all these universes that actually are acting quite isolated. And this is why probably it's one of the strongest points for our business case as South-South, which is to make connections, make it work via connections. So that's a little bit about me. And I come from a multidisciplinary background as well: finance, administration, biomimicry, regenerative leadership. So it's quite a mix. And a little bit about Climate Ventures. We are an orchestrator of the Brazilian ecosystem and also of the international South now, given the movement we put ourselves since 2 years, 1 year and a half, more or less, working together with organizations like Prataps. And what we do, we accelerate the ecosystem. So not one business, but we like big walls that need that we hit sometimes in terms of finance, regulatory space, you name it. So we like working with those big complex problems and how can we bring them down so that we can strengthen the ecosystem as a whole for everybody. So we are good in making connections, being high-level actors in the financial systems or specialists to projects on the ground. How can we work those connections and make things work at the end? We operate in a variety of laboratories and executive secretariat initiatives, and you are more than welcome to visit our website, climateventures.co, to understand a bit more. Thanks, Pratap.
Great. And we have Dr. Pradeepa Bolnath.
Thank you very much, and thanks for including Guyana in this very important and I would say very timely panel. We were having this discussion at a time where South-South collaboration, I think it's most vital. But a little bit about myself before I speak a little bit about Guyana and our priorities. I'm Pradeepa Bolnath, and I'm the Senior Director of Climate and REDD+ with Guyana's Ministry of Natural Resources. My background is in environmental economics, finding that right balance between economic development and environmental conservation, environmental protection. And I've worked for the majority of my career in the forestry sector. The emphasis of my work over the last 2 decades was around building MRV systems for forest reporting, as well as coordinating Guyana's climate finance program as we engage in the space of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, our RED Plus program. I'm also involved and I co-authored the low carbon development strategy for Guyana, which has mapped out the national pathway for building out development across every sector, taking on board low carbon considerations. The LCDS now underpins everything that we do in Guyana in terms of development. A little bit about Guyana. Guyana is a country in South America. We're also part of the Caribbean region and we are part of the Amazon basin. And an important fact about Guyana that we feel a lot of pride in is that we are 85% forest cover. So over the land cover of about 20 million hectares, about 18 million hectares of that are intact tropical forest. So this is a very big focus for Guyana in terms of our forest resources. We have a population of less than 1 million people, and a lot of our population, over 60% of our population are on the coast, our very vulnerable coastline, which is below sea level. So we focus a lot in Guyana on mitigation and on adaptation as well. And in the low carbon development strategy, which is, as I mentioned, the building block, the foundation of our work in Guyana, transitioning to clean and renewable energy is a significant priority. And I think that perhaps is going to be one of the areas that we see the most significant potential in terms of South-South collaboration. Thanks a lot, and I'm very happy to participate in this panel.
Great, thank you. And we have Ms. Sombul Munshi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks, Pratap, for inviting us. My name is Sombul, and I'm a part of the Climate Champions team. So we are the operational team that supports the climate high-level champions. So you'll see us across a few of the boards here. We're very excited to be here. In a sense, what the high-level champions do is they represent a lot of the priorities of non-parties or non-state actors. So essentially, businesses, investors, philanthropies, you name it. And it's been a very interesting journey for me working for them in my role as the emerging markets engagement lead. I'm sure that it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I myself am from India and very engaged overall in the emerging market space. Happy to learn from both of you and many of you in the room. What I'll say, in a nutshell is, I think to me, what it means to have more conversations like this is that there's a stronger voice for the region, the global South in general. And that's something that I'm very excited to see it shape up and become stronger. In the last 10 odd years that I've been working, what's been most striking is how partners have come together using, I would say, a mix of government support, but also support from incubators and organizations like Pratap's to really scale up innovative models in a way that they're replicable across regions. So really looking forward to that. And thank you so much for having us.
Great, thank you. Well, we'll start with some first questions, and this is something that I've seen. I've been working with so many startups in particular in the thousands over the last few years. What is the business case for South-South cooperation? This is language we normally don't use at COP. We know it's needed, right? But that's not the same thing as a business case. In fact, as we probably know, there are very few startups. I am picking out startups mainly because there's quite a bit of innovation that happens in startups. It does happen in nonprofits and governments as well. There are very few that show up here. We say we need South-South cooperation. What's the business case? Maybe I can start with you, Sombul, first. How does the business case for South-South collaboration fit into this bigger picture of what we're doing at COP?
Sure. I'm happy to take that and share a brief response as well. I think that drawing from some of my experience, of course, working for the champions, but also I spent a significant amount of time in the private sector before this. I think something that's really missing when we talk about the business case is explaining how partnerships will give you economies of scale. And I think they also reduce the gestation period for turning something from a pilot to a large-scale innovation. So very sort of boring terminology, but the short answer I would say is there is a really strong financial or business case because of the fact that you bring in competitive advantages from different actors based on what they're strong at, and they actually help you move from an MVP to a more stronger, scalable product and faster. That's something that I've seen in my own experience as well, but also, of course, supporting the work of small enterprises, but also startups. It's really what is required. It's the partnership that makes the case for the business case. So I'll put it that way and I'll pause here. Thanks.
Right, right. And maybe to you, Melina, I know Brazil is actually an amazing country when it comes to industry, agri-tech, so much technology comes here, and there is a thriving startup ecosystem. But Brazil is a big country. So why do Brazilian entrepreneurs or innovators, why do they want to go out beyond Brazil? I know Sombul mentioned scale. Is that the main reason?
As well, I think. But maybe I step before that, where we come from. We come from the South, which is 80% of the population of the universe, of global Earth, right? We have 80% of the biodiversity. We are connected somehow. So I think this is, first of all, the consciousness that we need to have. The second point is what you mentioned about the language that we use sometimes. Oh, let's not use, business case language during a COP moment. Language is actually 80% of the connection among human beings when we think culturally speaking. So this is quite important that we meet people where they are. So we need to use different languages depending on where we are, to whom we are talking to. And I think that's one of the powerful things that the South probably knows how to do in a very, very sensible way. But back to your point, complementing that, which I fully agree, where do I sign, with what Sombul mentioned? I think it's about market fit, scale, and speed. Market fit, because when we think about the solutions, especially in the case of Brazil, they are stress test in an environment of Brazil with the profile and the challenges that we have here. That stress test could be a lot more powerful if we do that together, given that there are similarities, but there are differences as well. Entrepreneurs, startups could benefit from a more collaborative stress test in that case to make businesses more sustainable. The other thing is about speed to adoption, because we face in the South similar challenges when it comes to finance gaps, regulatory space, the big walls that I mentioned that we need to bring down. We can be stronger if we do that in a more collaborative way, sharing best practices, sharing our learnings. I've been participating in some panels, observing others, and I see a lot of similar solutions and people are not talking. So what it takes for us to do more collaborative than competition approach, how much we want that. And I think that's the provoking aspect that we bring when we say we are orchestrators of the ecosystem. It's about collaboration at the end. So there are couple of benefits that I think if we manage to get people to listen to the real, genuine collaboration opportunity, we're going to advance this agenda a lot.
Right, right. Great. Now, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, 16 years in clean tech, and I've only been coming to COP recently. It was never in my agenda. You mentioned collaboration, et cetera. Do you see this amongst Brazilian innovators, that they actually do want to, you mentioned stress testing in different environments, which requires collaboration. Do you see this, or is everyone struggling to either solve their own market or think that that's where they need to stay? It's not easy to cross countries.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy because you start with the circle of influence and the circle of problems and things that you have to solve first, right? And to start with, the businesses are underfinanced. So we saw in your data, and we can confirm that with the studies that we've been working together, which is less than 10%, and even, I mean, a lot less. Sometimes it's less than 1% compared to what we have in terms of investment coming from the north to other solutions not in the south. So there is a bit of a survival mode first, which is, where is my local market and how can I survive here? But that does not exclude the possibility and the opportunity of doing things in parallel across boundaries internationally.
Mhm.
And this is another way of growing your business instead of only in your local market. So I'd love to see more Brazilian solutions, green solutions, crossing the bridge to India, to Guyana, to Colombia, to other places that we could learn, grow together, and share technology together as well. So why not? Regulatory space is another one where we can help governments to understand what's blocking us, because we have more similarities than differences when it comes to those challenges. And if we orchestrate our language and our positioning in a strong advocacy to show how things are, how doors could be more open for that kind of development, that could help all of us. And I think this is one thing, just to finish, that we are learning with COP in Brazil, which is how can we operate less in some isolated islands and more in an orchestrated world, especially given the inspiration of the circle of the ministers in finance. We can do the South-South collaboration along the same lines. So why not? So that is, I don't think we are missing more solutions. We are thinking organization, governance. Let's get together structurally.
Right. No, I agree with you. I wish there was more engagement between, for example, Asia and Latin America in particular. There's so many similarities there. Mostly Indian entrepreneurs you'll see go to India and parts of Southeast Asia, but even countries where we have very great opportunities like in Latin America and vice versa, the awareness and the platforms are not there yet. So moving on, this is now an interesting story in Guyana. I know Guyana a little bit. My kids are half Guyanese, actually. Now, Guyana is in a very unique position of rapidly both developing capacity capabilities and requiring technologies from outside. And I do know that one of the areas that Guyana in particular is looking is in the Global South. In fact, there's a Guyanese delegation in my hometown in India, Visakhapatnam, on Friday itself, looking where financing solutions can come. In the case of Guyana, how do you balance the Global South? The US is there, big European countries are there. Where do you see the opportunities for technologies to come in from the Global South for India? Sorry, for Guyana.
So that's a really interesting question because it really strikes at the core of choosing priorities, figuring out what the short-term objectives are as we build out our development trajectory to the course of 2030, which is the first stage of our low carbon development strategy 2030 in building out that development roadmap. So some would say that in Guyana, we have what is a good problem, that there is so much potential for growth and development in almost every sector. We're one of the highest and most rapidly advancing economy in the world. But that brings along with it several challenges. And some of those challenges are about how do we manage the pace of this development to ensure that the development takes place in a way that is managed and that serves the people best. In Guyana, one of the big priorities that we've identified has been in clean and renewable energy. We have mapped out in our low carbon development strategy a way to achieve this, whereby by 2030, approximately 80% of the energy that will be required for the grid will come from clean and renewable energy sources. I make reference to this because I believe this is perhaps the single biggest sector that could benefit from South-South collaboration. We're building out right now our solar energy capability. And a lot of that we're learning by doing. And many of those lessons have already been totally explored at some of the South-South, partners. As we look towards India and we look towards China and we look towards Brazil, they have scaled up solar energy in a remarkable way, a pathway that Guyana is looking to take now. So I think for solar energy, for clean and renewable energy, it is a high and top priority for Guyana. A second priority that I think could certainly benefit from South-South collaboration and also a big objective within our low carbon development strategy is on climate adaptation. Guyana has a population of less than 1 million people. About 60% of that population live on the coast. We're below sea level. And we've faced significant impacts from flooding events almost every year to a point where in 2005, about 60% of our gross domestic product was wiped out because of a single flooding event. So what we've mapped out to do in Guyana through the LCDS is a way to circle in climate finance to build adaptive capability to mitigate against that risk of climate adaptation capacities being developed to offset the risks of flood events. And about 90% of our climate finance so far has gone towards building adaptive capabilities. And we have been trying to balance that with both coastal priorities and hinterland priorities. In Guyana, we have about 15% of our population live in the interior regions of Guyana. So they have their own adaptive challenges. So adaptation on the coast and in the interior regions are top priority. When we look towards Brazil, there is so much we share together in terms of indigenous peoples and local communities, making benefits reach to those who really matter for protecting ecosystems. And in Guyana, we've piloted a model program that has seen over 20% of our revenues from climate finance go directly to forest-based communities. And many of them are looking to the global south to see how we can share these experiences and how we can benefit as well in building out this program.
Right, right. No, right. I have a question to follow up because Guyana is very interesting in that in the next few years, you will be developing a capability and capacity for innovation. You have now the resources to really drive this clean tech in your region. And I have this question, innovation and startups, this is a competitive world. Most of the policymakers I speak to, even of course from India, but even small countries like Maldives, they want to make sure that they can develop capacity to innovate going forward. These are long-term economic development strategies. How do we compete? How do we collaborate without this competition overriding this basic interest?
So the way we see it in Guyana is that we need to build human capacity, partly because we have such a small population, but also because a lot of the industries that are developing now are looking to external to Guyana for those collaborations. We're looking towards the global north as well. We have strong collaboration with the United States, with Canada, with the UK, with Europe. And importantly, we're looking to the global south as well. A big priority for us is in building human capability because the short-term objective is to strike these partnerships with the global north and the global south. But our ultimate objective is to engender the kind of human resources capability to take forward a lot of this ourselves. Our president recently announced a big initiative that is focused on harnessing and optimizing AI and digital technology within the industries, especially within the manufacturing sector. Actually, just a few days ago, earlier this week, we launched a training platform for there to be an expansion of the work we do, not only in the private sector, but in the government as well, in building out that digital technology and AI capability. So I think in many ways, what we need to do in Guyana, and this has been the way we look at it, there are many gaps that need to be filled. And the way to do that is by localizing the capacities so that when we look towards 3 years into the future and 5 years into the future, there wouldn't be a reliance so much on external assistance, but we would be having a lot of these capabilities engendered and as part of our local industry. And I think that is where the Global South could be of most help, not in giving financial resources, but in technical collaboration and in sharing experiences, knowledge, and showing what has worked and what hasn't worked so that we don't make those same mistakes that others have learned from the hard way.
Can I compliment?
First.
I love what you say. And just one data point that occurred to me, which is part of the study that we just published, that about 0.6% is actually invested in R&D in the South in terms of GDP. This is almost nothing compared to other countries. And this is where the opportunity is when we think localizing solutions, looking at our people and how we can help the solutions coming from these places. The other data point is that if we really find a way to organize this governance and play together this game, we have the opportunity to have 15 million green jobs in the South by 2030. This is quite a change for our people. And we can get there. It's just here. So we can work together to get this done. And I think for me, it's one thing which is very important. We need to advocate our position to change the perception of being the places where we get investments to support what we are doing, because we have the climate problems, to become the climate exporters in terms of solutions and innovation. I think this is a important mindset, and we have the solutions, and it's about how we position ourselves as well, coming from the Global South, so that we can leave that mindset and change to becoming exporters of solutions.
Right, right. No, that's true. And but I have another question. We don't need COP for this. We don't need these fora, et cetera. I mean, we were talking about innovation, technology, business, and in my own experience, in some parts of this, I've seen the trade delegation after trade delegation come with almost no results. Maybe it was a first attempt over the last 20 years in the Global South, but very limited kind of engagement. Why is it, I don't want to generalize too much, but why isn't it not happening? Maybe I can start with you, Sombul, as much as we want.
So that's a tricky question, and I don't want to get into trouble today. But to keep it very simple, I think it's in many markets in Asia, of course, not to overgeneralize, but there's always a fear of being a first mover. When it comes, especially, let's say, to partnerships like this that are less proven or less popular. That fear, I think, of being a first mover is something that holds people back. There's a need to plug in that information gap that actually communicates or helps people understand that it's a pool of knowledge that you use to adapt. And a huge part of adapting to climate change is that you constantly need to change your strategy, be it in Guyana or in Brazil or in India, wherever you are today. Whenever you look around you, a lot of things have changed. So to understand the value of partnerships, that's something where there's a need to change the mindset that being a first mover, it's actually not as bad as it looks. It's something that really needs to be scaled up. And on the more positive side, what I'll say is what we've seen in a lot of different countries in Asia is the way that startups often pitch. It's been very helpful to have a point of reference to say, I'm building the next Grab for India. So that helps, set the tone when you're going to a venture capitalist, when you're going to a government institution. You can actually pitch to them with a reference point. And that's the whole power of a collaboration, that today, if I had to explain to somebody that I'm building something, I can tell them that I'm building the next climate ventures in Bangladesh. And actually, people would understand what I'm talking about. So to keep it simple and short, I think a huge part or a huge challenge is just having access to that information in a pooled and in a structured way. And secondly, to have that sort of ability to force those partnerships, not necessarily, I would say, with the public sector, but very often that power comes within philanthropy and businesses working together. And that's what we've seen across Asia. And what I'll pause with after this point is a huge part of this whole movement of the Global South coming together. A lot of credit that I would give also is to the philanthropy sector. They've been investing very deeply in South Asia and Southeast Asia to help, especially startups, scale up a lot of climate tech, especially when it comes to, let's say, agriculture, health, or even digitalization. What's been most interesting is to see that it's not just the money, sometimes it's access to the right information. So thank you so much.
Right, right. No, we see that, of course, philanthropy has been very successful, especially for first pilots in many countries, including India. But there is a tremendous amount of private sector in this, whether in the funding side, the 95% of funding actually comes from the private sector, even for startups, right? Now, Brazil and India, Brazil recovered from the 80s kind of hyperinflation, et cetera. India, we started liberalizing early 90s, but there's not much trade, much less innovation flows between India and Brazil. So what's the main reason here why we're not seeing it happen on its own organically? We do expect it in other industry sector, private sector, governments naturally doing it. We're not seeing much engagement, let's say, between India and Brazil.
Yeah, and maybe it's not about not willing to do that, but it's the natural way of two considerable, sizable countries, which both have very large internal markets, right? And it's natural that entrepreneurs are going to focus first there, but the opportunity do exist. So I see less than a barrier and more than it's more about an opportunity than a barrier or any problems there. It's also about the money, I think, at the end, investing in these businesses. We all know that the green solutions, they do need some catalytic money, as you're mentioning. And it's not there, especially when you compare philanthropy in Brazil. Philanthropy in Brazil is doing a lot less than the potential that could do. So there is still a way to explore what this potential could be compared to other countries. And these businesses, they do, if we think especially between 3 and 7 years, the early stage, especially when we do another cut, which is businesses working with restoration, this is probably where most of them either die or struggle tremendously to survive. And this is one of the reasons why we've been working in financial mechanisms that could support that window, being a variety of capitals that could be investing during that window so that we could cross that barrier. But when it comes to interoperation across countries, being India and any other country, it's a matter of market opportunities, which is exactly what our collaboration and structure could support and help to. I don't see any particular barrier to that opportunity.
Right, right. Now, India and Brazil are different, as you mentioned, large countries, etc. Guyana actually has a different challenge. It's not a why is it happening, but perhaps a how. And maybe it's kind of as maybe not talking for other countries, but thinking about small countries in particular. I know you're sourcing technologies from the north, south, etc., at the same time as building capacity to build this low carbon development strategy of the government. How do you balance finding solutions which may have long-term or medium-term implication on your pathways while building capacity in a small country for technology?
So, it's been an interesting challenge for Guyana because many of the financing sources that are available out there are more interested in giving readiness financing that has a particular duration and that eventually comes to an end after 2 years or 3 years, which would be the length of time for support for readiness. The big challenge that is faced then, though, is for the financing of what that readiness concludes is really needed. And I think that is where the greatest hesitation is for large financing institutions to then come in and take the mantle up from the outcome of that readiness into a full-scale, larger-scale project. So that there is a divide between readiness financing and implementation financing. And that, I think, is going to be and has been one of the bigger challenges that countries that are developing as fast as Guyana is currently facing. And I believe a big part of that solution has to do with the private sector coming more on board in terms of investing in countries in the global south. So, traditionally it has been the development banks, the World Bank in Guyana, and in the Caribbean, it has been the IDB, the CDB. We've had some support as well from multilateral institutions like the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund. Where Guyana has pivoted now and has been increasingly focused on as we move towards the next 5 years of financing innovation and development projects is in the realm of partnerships with the private sector. And part of this focus on capacity building, but also in building out innovation within local institutions and the local private sector. I think from the point Sobel raised earlier, being a first mover has a lot of disadvantages, but there are also clear advantages in being a first mover. And I think some of this, once this hesitation is surmounted, there could be a lot more confidence building that could take place to make the private sector more bold to take on, investment projects. Like we've seen that in Guyana as well, whereby the local banking institutions are a bit more hesitant than international banks to take on the level of risk for this rapid pace of development. So I think the appetite for risk is what we need to see expanded and become more attuned to where this development pathway is leading us. So I think 2 points there in summary. There really is a divide between readiness financing and implementation financing. And that gap could cause very damaging delays when recommendations are made to take a project forward. And then there isn't the implementation finance at the scale needed to implement those projects, whether it's on adaptation, whether it's on clean and renewable energy, whether it's on mitigation. And the second challenge is the risk appetite for local institutions and the local private sector to take on a bit more. That is changing a bit in Guyana, but I think a lot more will happen over the next few years.
And just to complement, because you reminded me about one thing, I normally make a joke when we are sitting with the private sector for financing businesses, and people start talking about the risk and how we should assess, or the risk is too high and all that. And I do a bit of provocation saying, what is the risk? Because actually we don't know the risk. It's not about the risk being high. It's because in most of the cases, we don't have a history of data yet to justify what the risk should be. So it's actually a behavior of risk averse rather than having high risk. And the invite for the private sector is, would you like to come in and build data? That's where you're going to be investing your money instead of the risk is high. Which is, again, a different perception of how we can position this and bring the private sector more into. I'm not saying that it's easy, but we need to help people understand that actually we are building something. And until we have the trees, in the case of restoration, at the height that we expect to have the data, we don't have the risk.
Right. My own experience in innovation is nothing is easy. My whole life, I think, in innovation. But having said that, maybe before we open up for questions in just a bit, very quickly, these are big challenges. These take time to build these partnerships. What is the one thing we can do today? We'll start with you, Sombul, to support clean tech, collaborating on clean tech across the global south, whether on the learning side, solution side, policy. What's the one thing we should focus on this year?
I think
And it could be from your own work as well.
no, absolutely. From what the climate champions, what they champion very literally as well, right? Very, very simply, I would say just listen. When whether it's a startup or it's a venture capitalist, there is a very clear ask, like what Milena is saying. Either it's data, either it's money, or it's efforts for capacity building. So when you're getting an ask, actually make an effort to move from the risk aversion mentality to actually listen to what is required. There's a challenge, of course. I understand, like what many of you in the room also know, that there are financial constraints. You need more data to make an informed decision, but there is some merit in being that first mover and really taking that action. And what I'll pause with one last thing is that the champions themselves, they have their own campaign where they're supporting smaller businesses. Climate Ventures is also a partner for us in climate proofing SMEs. What I do want to say is there are multiple stakeholders, but there's a need for especially larger corporations to come in. There's a need for philanthropy to come in and for all of them together to make a much stronger case, including to the public sector. So listen, that's all I'll ask. Thank you.
Nice. But Pradeepa, you don't have time to listen only because I know the pace of development that's happening in Guyana. This next year, like what would be one thing you'd like to see for Guyana in its engagement with the South in tech? What would be a positive or success for Guyana?
So in Guyana, we've identified, as I alluded to in one of my earlier responses, a big focus on digital technology and the inclusion of AI within our sectors. One of the good aspects of the challenge that we face is that we're now starting out building some of these sectors and some of these manufacturing capabilities. So now is the right time to get those components, those building blocks exactly the way we want them positioned. So in a way, even though now we're starting out to build out some of these sectors, which could be a challenge because we're not more advanced than some of the other countries in the global south, I think we're at the right spot so that whatever capabilities, whatever learning, whatever capacities we need to build into manufacturing processes and human capability to do and solve problems, now is the time to build those into the processes. So digital technology and the inclusion of AI have been identified as a top priority for our manufacturing sector. And yesterday, Guyana participated in a side event hosted by the Tony Blair Institute that addressed some of this. How do we harness and optimize the vast array of opportunities out there and to bring those to the global south? A lot of these challenges have already been solved by the global north, but it stays there. What we need to do now is to find a way, an access point, so that we benefit from some of that experience. I think the interest is there, the willingness is there, but the pathway needs to be mapped in a manner that makes it more accessible and that creates the opportunities that we need in the global south to be able to build out the industries in the way that we need to. Renewable and clean energy would be a top priority for us. And infrastructure development is a close second, if not an equal first priority. So for Guyana, I think a lot will change for the better, and a lot of the industries will start to develop and expand over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. And digital technology and AI will sit at the center of that development, I believe.
All right, great. And before we open up for questions, Milena, I know that you also published, Climate Ventures has published a report, maybe in the answering the same question and sharing about this report that actually we created together.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, we come as Climate Ventures, we come from a DNA of social technology. So it's quite important for us to work with, build businesses and solutions, working with local communities, indigenous people. That's what we believe, that when we think bioeconomy in Brazil, this is where the solution should be. Otherwise, we run the risk of concentrating things in the same hands, and we don't help with the case of Brazil, which is such a distance between power, business, the richest and the poorest, and all those kind of issues there, as well as inclusion. So that's important in whatever solution we find. When it comes to the study, and if we had a magic wand to, solve the issue, what we've been studying is basically that there is some sort of answer around working shared data, which is the point that you both made, across South, so that we can learn together and move along together, potentializing each other. So there is something about having that backbone, kind of data room, backbone structured. There is also something about procurement rules and building procurement, some sort of sandboxes that we could help corporations to read climate tech in a different way, because buyers is something that we need in our ecosystem. And if we don't get those, we don't survive. So how can we help the buyers to read the ecosystems that we build? And there is the capital, where the catalytic capital plays a role, and it's hard work to continue to work the mindset of what the role the catalytic capital can play, what's the role of philanthropy in Brazil and how much that could grow, and how the perception of risk of the private sector also could evolve to better understand the type of businesses that we have the opportunity. It's not a matter of only catalytic capital any longer. There is a very strong link with the sustaining bioeconomy, especially in Brazil, and most likely with other countries as well. So it is investable, and we need to move from that aid recipients kind of mindset forever to something that we do believe and have data that shows it's business, it's real business that could happen there. But it does require visionary leadership, and not everybody has that mindset. So who is up for it?
Nice. Well, we have time, I think, for one or two questions from the audience. Yes. Is there an extra mic?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm come from the country from the Southeast Asia, which is Cambodia. I'm working in the government. I'm the General Director of Housing, Ministry of Land Management, and very interesting to hear about South-South collaboration. I would like to, because if we compare the ecosystem between the Latin America and the Southeast Asia country, it's not very much different in terms of the ecosystem, social ecosystem also, but it may different in terms of the economic feature and geopolitics in those between the two continents. I would like to ask if any possibility to expand the collaboration between the South-South country, between Latin America and South Asia. For example, the Cambodia, the country also to be work hard on the climate change and this one. I used to know the head of the World Bank in Brazil used to work in my country. And he's the one who introduced a South-South collaboration between country and country. If any possibility to expand, so we would work together on this one by submitting a concept note or proposal to the head of the World Bank Brazilian office, so that he will find any solution on this one. Thank you very much.
Great. Maybe Milena, you'd like to take this?
We can take this together, right? Expansion of this movement, for sure. We are an open tent. We want more South getting together with us. So Yeah, and we are both together with learning a lot about Guyana now, but also together with the Climate Champions team. Doors are open. Yeah.
Mulanda Jimmy Juma from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. First of all, I want to say congratulations to you. Well done in your presentations, very rich. I learned about right information, access to right information, sharing experiences. And, just building on this question, like, how do you plan to expand or extend this to the rest of other 80% of Global South? And what are the challenges that you are anticipating in that expansion? For example, bringing Africa, on board in this South-South collaboration, because that would be a missing link if Africa is not part of it. So what do you anticipate are the challenges in that South-to-South collaboration? But also, South-to-South collaboration has been going on for many, many years. How do we make it really more effective as far as the startup are concerned? Thank you.
So perhaps thanks a lot for the question from the DRC. Perhaps I can share some perspectives, being from the Global South and, looking towards other regions where we could learn from and also share experiences. I think there are three channels that we can seek to optimize. So like in the case of Guyana, what we've seen over the last couple of years is the increasing establishment of chambers of commerce. So like we have a Ghana Chamber of Commerce in Guyana, we have an American Chamber of Commerce, we have a Canadian Chamber of Commerce, we have a British Chamber of Commerce. So I think bilaterally, we can do a lot as well. And that will help for a more, for lack of a better word, intimate relationship between the private sector of two countries in the Global South. I believe as well we could do a lot through organizations like the ones represented here on this panel in creating those linkages that might exist but might not be as strong as they need to be for there to be more continuous and consistent contact. And what the third track I would like to recommend, the non-governmental organizations in Guyana, like Conservation International, like the World Wildlife Fund, like business incubators, they also have a presence across various regions in the Global South. And I think we need to optimize that relationship more so that the networks that are already established through non-governmental partners, we can seek to use those for other purposes. So those would be my three suggestions. And I think they can all work together in creating those linkages that need to be engendered.
And I would reinforce that the way we've been thinking together about this organization, of course, that to get into action, we need a minimum governance to collaborate at the end. So we've been working with organizations that could somehow play this role of orchestrators, right, for countries, so that we can connect with as many as we can, but with organizations that initially that could play this role in your region, in your country, and all that. So, and the point that you bring about bringing CI and eventually TNC, that's great. That's another link that we in Climate Ventures have as well, given that we are the Executive Secretariat for Nature Investment Lab in Brazil, as well as the Brazil Restoration Bioeconomy Finance Coalition. Those two organizations are globally present there. And that's the network that we are building.
Great. I know there's a few more questions, but we are running out of time. So I'd like to thank again UNFCCC for this opportunity, everyone here in the room, everyone online. There is a lot we can do in South-South collaboration in tech. And to answer the question in the back, it's different from 20 years ago. There's a richness of new networks. There's an innovation bug. There's a startup economic development that is happening in the Global South. I think there's many ways we can build this collaboration, not just in the South-South Collective, that this specific platform, but in many of the other ways that Pradeepa and what Climate Champions team is doing as well. And I want to thank again my panelists, Milena, Pradeepa, and Sobul. Is it time? Okay. We do have time for one more question.
Thank you very much. I am from Azerbaijan, Baku. Did you hear about South-South NGO platform, which is established last year on 28th of April? Did you hear about it? And do you have any comments on it? And we have generated more than 100 countries, NGOs, and we talked to them about South-South cooperation and etc. I don't know, are you aware about it or not?
Happy to explore. I don't know more about that, but thanks for mentioning.
Same sentiment. You know that last year we had the champion from Azerbaijan, Nigar Arpadaray. So that's going to be fabulous, I'm sure. But same sentiment as Milena. We're very happy to understand more on the opportunities. Thanks.
Same from Guyana as well.
All right, so thank you again. And of course, the conversation doesn't stop here. We're all here in COP for the next few days. We all also connected in so many other ways. If we just reach out, do reach out, if I may say on behalf of the panelists, if there's something interesting that you heard here. South-South Collective for the Climate is a specific program with Climate Ventures and Climate Collective in India and other partners in the Global South. If you're interested, please reach out to us as well. Thank you again.